Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Beacon in the Storm. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Stormrider Carlton. Today I have a very special guest with us. I have Tim Goldich with us today. Hey there, Tim. How's it going?
Hi, Bradford. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Absolutely. Let me just introduce you first before we get into it. So, Tim is an author and men's work facilitator. He has devoted the last 25 years to researching and pondering over and refining viewpoints related to gender equality issues. He's an author of the book Loving Men, Respecting Women, The Future of Gender Politics. And he is dedicated to educating the public about equality of the genders. He's a board member of both the National Coalition for Men and of the Mankind Project, two organizations that support men politically and emotionally. Anything else you want to tell us about yourself, Tim?
Uh, that pretty much covers it. Yeah, so I've been at this a long time, over 30 years.
30 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's almost as old as I am. So how about we just start out? Why did you decide to get into this? Because I have only been in this about 2 months now, and I was not expecting kind of I don't want to say the backlash, but I didn't expect it to be as toxic as it was to just talk about issues that
No,
one of the sexes has.
that's right. I know. Well, um, well, I got into it because I was a part of a little gang of women. These five women that were my friends, that were my social support system and all, and I kept getting sort of beat up by their, feminist rhetoric, and so I thought, well, there has to be some other side of there has to be something more to this than that, and I went to research it, and I started writing a book, and basically the conclusion I reach is that it all balances out.
Okay.
That in the liabilities suffered and the benefits enjoyed and the power and the victimization, the freedoms, the constraints, the joys, the sorrows, the good, the bad, light and shadow, it all balances out between woman and man, and I believe it always has.
Okay. So, on the call last week, I told you I might be a little bit contrarian, even though I've been doing research on the subject myself and
Yeah,
learning about these disparities. And so, one of the things that I hear nonstop is that men don't actually have any issues; that they're just complaining about losing power.
right.
What's your opinion on that?
So I think if you look at gender realities, it plays out along the respect axis, then that's pretty much true. Then you can really make a case for men have the power and women are the victims. But if you look at gender reality as it is played out along the love axis, I believe it all flips around. Then you can make a really strong case that women have the power and men are the victims. So, how are men less loved? Well, so many ways. I mean, just look at the fact that we send men off to war. We hard hazardous labor, homelessness, imprisonment, parental alienation. Every Father's Day, well, we every Mother's Day, I should say, we make more phone calls than any other day of the year, even more than Christmas Day, a lot more than on Father's Day. By contrast, on Father's Day, we make the largest number of collect calls. Um, we buy and send about half of again as many Mother's Day cards as Father's Day cards. So there's a million different ways of demonstrating that men are actually less loved. Men are more respected but less loved. Women are more loved but less respected. And who can say which is better and which is worse? So I'm willing to call it even.
Okay. And you know, why is it that we are this way? Is it just, some from time immemorial, like the gender roles were like established and then the 60s happened, the Civil Rights Act passed, and then we're just trying to figure out where we're at now? Or like what's going on in your opinion? Why is it that you think men are less loved and women are less respected? What's that?
In my opinion, it goes all the way back to instinct and eros. It goes all the way back to primal archetypal aspects of the human psyche. You see, for millennia, the gender story that we told was basically about hot, hunky heroes, empowered alpha males coming to the rescue of your sweet, weak, beautiful, innocent damsels in distress. And this even is based on, well, the fact that women or females are the limiting factor in reproduction. That is to say, the total number of offspring you can expect to have in the next generation depends entirely on the total number of birthing females you have in your population. You can double the number of males, you can cut the number of males in half. It won't make any difference in terms of what you can expect to have in your next generation. So for this reason, when you look at purely reproductive efficiency, females are the key. And there then is species survival value in protecting the female more than the male.
Okay.
And this translates into loving women more than men. And meanwhile, why do we respect men more than women? Because of all that men do to compensate for this.
Okay. And is that something that's changing, or is that something that is that the reason why this topic is so toxic? Is that no one wants to change it?
That's right. In simplest terms, the reason why we go with men have the power and women are the victims is because that's what feels right. That's what's congruent with instinct and eros. Meanwhile, contradicting it just feels bad. Bringing up the facts and truths of female power and male victimization, the other half of gender reality, doesn't feel good.
Okay, so I'll admit, like, I was essentially, I guess I could say I was raised as a feminist. I was the one guy in law school who went to the Law Association for Women events. I'm deeply concerned about women's issues. And I'm fairly certain if I Google your name, I'm going to find somewhere that you're a misogynist, that you hate women, because just even talking about this issue, you're going to have that slung at you. Is that any of that true?
Well, no. I mean, all right. So to address that, you see, that's a red herring, this whole hating women. For one thing, everybody hates women and everybody hates men because everybody has suffered at the hands of both women and men. Meanwhile, everybody loves women and everybody loves men. Women and men are the world. Everything we feel toward women and men. Really, what this is saying, this whole, accusation of misogyny, is do you have the audacity to direct hostility toward women? You see, you can direct hostility toward toxic masculinity all you want, but it's really what it comes down to is that any sort of hostility toward women is forbidden. There's not wrong with that, except that it stands in such contrast to hostility toward men.
So it seems to me that men, and if we want to bring race into it, white men specifically, are allowed to be made fun of. They're allowed to have hostility directed toward them. You can cast aspersions at them, and it's societally okay because everybody else has been historically disadvantaged. Why is that harmful?
Well, because it's a moral polarity. So basically, it's a woman good, the innocent victim, man bad, the overempowered oppressor. And that's a moral polarity. That's dividing humanity into two factions, one are good and the other bad. And historically, this has been going on frequently. I mean, it goes right back to the Christians bad, Romans good. I mean, it's a part of our history that's been going on forever. But these moral polarities may be common, but they do not end well. They're very, very poisonous.
Okay, I completely understand everything you're saying. I get the history behind it all. But I'm not a forward-thinking person. I look at the research that comes out today, and I find, just yesterday I recorded an episode of my show that I was looking at a research study that 70% of non-reciprocal domestic violence is perpetrated by women. So why is it that this idea of men oppressor, women victim is so strong when the science doesn't even show that? Now, men make up 90% of criminals. I understand all that part, but
Yeah, in the public realm, men are obviously much more violent than women, though women do have their ways of infusing their own human shadow into public environs, but in the personal space, in the domestic realm, yeah, women are initiating and perpetrating domestic violence at every level of violence at rates about equal to men, and those are the facts. But you see, the hero coming to the rescue of the damsel in distress trumps fact and logic. It's a more powerful. It has more power in the human psyche than fact and logic. So yes, if you look these things up, you can see the facts show that, for example, all 10 of the 10 most hazardous jobs, as well as the bottom 24 of the 25 worst jobs, as rated by the Jobs Rated Almanac, are all 90 to 100% male occupied, and therefore men are well over 90% of the work-related fatalities. I mean, these are the facts, but they do not overturn the instinctual emotional belief that men have the power and women are the victims.
sure. Now, you said something earlier. It was a little bit of a generalization I wanted to catch you on. You said men are more violent than women. Now, was it 1 out of 10 men is going to end up in prison at some point? But that means that 9 out of 10 aren't, and so that's an A in my book, right? So 90% of men are not likely to commit a crime, not likely to do domestic violence, not to assault anybody, not hurt anybody. Why are we throwing this blanket onto all men, saying that they're angry, they're mean, they're harmful, they're scary, we have to watch out for them, when, I mean, sure, a small minority, 10% is a minority still.
Yeah, well, males just make easy targets for what you want to blame. Go ahead, try and blame women for things. See how well that works out for you. It's again, it comes down to like sort of instinct, and then just look at the gender political landscape. Okay, so in the realms of gender conflict and complaint, gender activism and advocacy, gender ideology, gender defining, gender issues, gender studies, gender politics, gender anything, there is one thing on the one side, and on the other side there's nothing. There's there's the gender political movement of women, and then there's kind of like nothing. So ideologically, the battle of the sexes is a battle in which only one side showed up.
But you're here, right? And it's not just you. There are other people. You have an entire organization that you work with, like a nationwide organization. I don't know if it's worldwide, but there are also worldwide organizations. Is it that they just don't have the manpower, so to speak? Is it that no one's willing to talk to them? Is it the liberal media? Like why is it that the other side didn't show up?
Well, okay, so first of all, there's an equal partnership. Woman and man are equal partners in the human system, and they play an equal overall force of influence and are equally responsible for outcomes. So it wasn't just women that got us into this gender political fiasco that I'm seeing out there. Woman and man was equal partner in creating this whole situation. Woman stood up and said, I am the powerless victims in all things, and man did not protest. He chivalrously agreed to this and said, okay, and man is hugely invested in protecting women, and he will certainly throw other men under the bus in a heartbeat if he believes that these men are acting improperly toward women. He will not take a stand on his own behalf. He will not seek to take resources from women and children. He will reject victim. For men, victim is like anathema. It's as soon as men get to find something as victims, they cease to be men. It's the vast majority of men simply reject the concept. They will not see themselves as victims, and they don't want to see women as more powerful either. It's the same thing. So so that's like the best explanation I have for why only one side showed up in this what I call battle of rhetoric.
Okay. How do we change it? I mean, yeah, that's you've been at this for 30 years. I mean, must have some idea of what we have to do. Do we have to re-educate the children? Do we have to re-educate the parents, the politicians? Who needs to be talked to in order to be able to change society?
We need gender equalism.
Okay.
We need to have gender equalist classrooms in schools. And what they would do is they would teach male perspective and follow it with female perspective. Back to male perspective, female perspective. Okay, so it'll be like this. You take a look at somehow throughout history, men have seemed somehow more important than women. Okay, and you take a look at that and you go in depth and you work what all that means and the consequences. And then when you're done with that, then you look into the mirror opposite and you see somehow throughout history, women have seemed somehow more valuable, having a greater innate value as lovers and as spouses and as parents, and too valuable to be just sort of disposable in homelessness, imprisonment, battlefields, hard hazardous labor, and so on. So you go into some depth about that and look at that side. You look at all these, every issue. So you look at anorexia, and as seen through a gender political lens, you'd see that this is women taking a self-destructive, sometimes fatal path, and their efforts to achieve a societal ideal that we might call the Barbie doll figure, right? And then we look in the mirror opposite, and we see males taking a self-destructive and sometimes fatal path in their efforts to achieve a G.I. Joe physique. And how do they do that? Through steroid poisoning and human growth hormone abuse. And so in other words, we see that anorexia is mirrored by this steroid abuse. And we see that an anorexic woman who looks in the mirror, she thinks she looks fat even when she's emaciated. And meanwhile, someone with muscle dysmorphia looks in the mirror and he thinks he looks thin and skinny and weak even when he's bulked up. We see how these things mirror each other and reflect each other. They're mirror opposites. And they don't cancel each other out. They continue to be huge issues of great importance. Mm-hmm. What changes when we look at things as mirrored is the attitude.
Okay.
It's the attitude toward these things. Okay. And rather than blame each other for these things, we view them rather as matters of shared responsibility.
Okay. So that would be fantastic to do, right? To be able to have that perspective.
I think
Um,
so.
as you were speaking, I heard in my head a voice I've heard numerous times before of many of the women that I've worked with, and they would have just said, "Well, that's all the patriarchy's fault. All of these problems are the patriarchy's fault. If it hadn't been the systems established by men that created these systems that both men and women have to live in, we wouldn't have all these issues."
Yeah.
When I ask, who is the patriarchy? Who specifically at the moment is the patriarchy? Because so, like, if we're gonna me too them, like, hey, let's say names, right?
Yeah.
Um, is it the patriarchy? Is it like, is that stopping us from having this vision that you have of being able to teach people both sides, or what
Yeah.
is the patriarchy from your perspective?
Okay. So the word patriarchy is a valid word, but only when it's understood in conjunction with its mirror opposite, which I'll call the matricensis, that is the female consensus, the sisterhood. The myth is that this patriarchy stands alone, that this is the male power that rules our human world. In that sense, when defined like that, this so-called patriarchy never existed. So women are and have always been about equal in number, evenly matched, with about equal overall weaponry and efficacy. And women have, in the collective, always played an equal overall force of influence. So women are equally responsible for outcomes. So no, it's not just this patriarchy.
Okay.
We're in this mess because of woman and man in equal partnership created it.
Okay. Now, Tim, let's look into the future for a second. So, the way things are, let's say they continue to go the way they are. What is life going to be like, say, 40 years from now?
Well, who knows who can read the future, right? I'm reminded of a video done by a woman named Karen Strawn, and she called it the fempocalypse.
Okay.
And she envisioned that if we continue to just trying to get myself in focus here on my stupid camera, if we continue to just indulge female perspectives while shutting out all male perspectives, she could envision the whole system collapsing.
How, like, how would it collapse? And I'll just kind of, as a brief example. So, in the past 40 years, since I think it was roughly 1983, 1985, the difference between enrollments in colleges for men and women has been skewed toward women. So it started out something like 45% men in the 80s. Now it's about 40% men enrolling in a degree education, not counting graduate degrees, which it's a bigger difference. Are you saying, like, if we continue to do what we're doing, men are going to be the human trash? Like, what is this fempocalypse you're referencing?
Um, well, for one thing, it's replacing meritocracy with quotas and affirmative action uh, that only women get, female only scholarships, Title IX. Um, oh boy, it's complicated. So here's this one example that Karen used. So in order to create a medical doctor,
Okay.
society actually ends up paying a fortune for that. You think that medical school, of course, is incredibly expensive, but apparently it only covers a fraction of what it costs. You get all these endowments. Medical school gets all these funding from the government. It gets funding from private sources and public sources. So now you've spent a fortune training a female doctor, and she's a very good female doctor, and she goes out in the world, and there's a high probability that she simply gets married and has children and the siren call of motherhood takes precedence, and she drops out. And the culture spent a fortune grooming her, training her, and now she doesn't want to do it anymore. She just wants to do it part-time.
Mhm. And that's
Um,
that's not a made up scenario. That actually happened to my wife. She had her own law practice. Baby
mhm,
popped out the moment the baby was put on her chest. She said, "I'm not going back to work," and that was essentially the end of it. And I've had
right.
numerous friends where they had highly successful careers working in government, working in private industry, and baby popped out, they were done. And so,
Yeah.
like, how does that affect society, though? It's you
Well,
know,
it's complicated, but I just described kind of how it affects society. Um,
I,
in one form. Uh,
and I get that, and I'm more confused than anything because, like, if we say meritocracy, societal factors somewhat tend that men may end up in positions of power. Um, if we do more affirmative action, then do we have to wait until a woman has a baby to decide whether she's going to stay in the career? It seems
yeah, I know. I know. No easy solutions. All I can say is that the solution is actually very simple. It's very unlikely. I don't think I'll live to see it, but the solution to this entire gender political fiasco is very simple. It's woman and man calling it even. That's it.
it
That's
seems
all it
simple
really.
enough. I mean, can we
Yeah.
call up Joe Biden? Just hey, can we just call it even?
Yeah.
Like, what's to stop us from doing that? What's to stop us from just going to the White
Uh,
House and getting an initiative pushed?
ideology, the ideology says that men have the power and women are the victims. Man bad, the over-empowered oppressor, woman good, the innocent victim. So as long as people believe that, the idea of calling it even seems absurd.
So it sounds like there's no solution for this until we've spent 40 years in the wilderness and everybody's died off and the new generations enters the promised land.
Well, that's possible. I mean, it could be that things have to get much worse before they get better. I don't know.
Okay. Is it men do men just have to shut up and accept what's changing and
Well, that's kind of been the solution for the last a long time. Man just kind of hides behind his newspaper, and woman berates him, and he just kind of weathers the storm. And men just kind of rolling over and saying yes, dear, has kind of been, well, like I say, the battle of the sexes being a battle in which only one side showed up. Um, yeah, I don't know. There are signs that both men and women are kind of seeing through the cracks in the facade of the male power, female victimization paradigm. We're
okay.
beginning to see elements of the reverse. It's not uncommon to know that males are doing poorly relative to females throughout the education system. Uh, it stands to reason that men will be the far majority of those killed on the job, and the majority of the homeless. We gotta know that men are the far majority of the imprisoned. Um, so maybe these facts and truths that lie on the other end of the balance beam might be growing in awareness.
Okay.
I mean, it used to be, 30 years ago, talking about it all balances out. I'd just be things thrown at me. I mean, it was be from both, men and women, just outraged. It still can evoke some outrage, but nowhere near like it used to. I think, on a deeply intuitive basis, we know that women have power. I mean, how could we not? We don't. You go into some large auditorium full of people and say, okay, all who believe that women have no power, raise your hands. I mean, nobody's going to raise their hand on that. we kind of on an intuitive basis, we know that women have power and men suffer their own particular version of the human condition. It's just this gender political ideology that prevents us from coming to a more conscious and verbalized understanding of the balance of power and victimization that has always been so.
Okay. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today, Tim. Before we wrap up, though, I want to ask you just kind of a general question. What does
Mm-hmm.
it mean to be a man? Not biological, but I mean, what are those qualities that we say that's a man? Because you know what, growing up, I was told to be a man, to man
Yeah.
up, to suck it up, to do all the things a men are supposed to do. No one ever defined it for me. I've had to figure this out myself. And one of my biggest issues, the reason I started this show is because I saw the stat that 80% of suicides are men. And it has to be that some of them, and I've seen some of their manifestos, I've seen some of their goodbye letters, is they just don't know how to be a man.
Ah. Well, I suspect that the single greatest factor in male suicide is a lack of love, a lack of empathy that men experience in the world. And we're seeing this, um, well, I could go there, but okay, so what does it mean to be a man? Well, traditionally, it's meant taking responsibility. It's
Women
meant
can do
having
that too,
intent.
though, right? Like,
Huh?
women can take responsibility.
Well, of course they can. So I'm just talking about what traditionally has defined a man, you know, whether it's true or not, is another
Okay.
matter. But, this is what we saw on the movie screen was the stoic man. He had uh, intellect, competence, prestige, toughness, strength, and courage, uh, and um, and fairness and integrity. And meanwhile, woman the women on the screen had beauty, grace, goodness, home, family, parenting. She basically had all things along the love axis, the nurturance, the moral high ground. This is how we have traditionally polarized humanity into men and women. This, of course, is broken down now. And we don't exactly know what constitutes a man and what constitutes a woman anymore.
I was going to say every quality you just described for both men and women, the other side can have. I think I'm beautiful. I think I have some grace. Like, I'm also tough. I work out.
Yeah,
I'm the man of the house. Both of my wife and daughter come to me if there's a bug in the house. Right? It's
right.
that one annoys me a little bit because like you guys should be able to take care of it yourself. But is that societal? Is it my wife was trained to be afraid of bugs, or is that genetic? Because I see a bug, I get scared too.
Well,
There's
it's
plenty of
both.
studies on the instinct part of it. I get that, but is
Yeah,
it
I don't think it's an either or thing. It's both. It's
okay?
both and it's both instinct and it's also enculturated. And going down that's one of the great like one of the great rabbit holes of gender is nature nurture debate. That's been going on for ages, and it's kind of a bottomless pit. To look into. It's fascinating. I love it, but it would take up the whole time. I just would say sufficient to say that it's both and that they interact with each other.
All right. Tim, do you have anything else you want to share with us before we sign off?
Uh, yeah, I just want to say that while woman and man calling it even may not seem very credible under the circumstances, it all begins with envisioning a thing. Um, the end of slavery began with imagining the end of slavery. Um, women's liberation began with the imagining it. Uh, so I would urge all there who are watching this to imagine such a thing as a world where woman and man have called it even.
All right. Tim Goldich, thank you so much for coming on with us today. If people want to reach out to you or find your book, how can they do that?
Well, you can always email me. That's Timothy A. Goldich, Goldich at hotmail.com. Yeah, I still got a hotmail.com. That's how old I am. And I can be found on Facebook. We are gender equalists.
Right. And I can vouch that Tim is very accessible. I emailed him that from that email address, and he responded pretty much right away. So
yeah,
right.
Yeah. Put something in the subject so I know it's not, I don't know, Best Buy trying to sell me something. Let me know that it's put something in the subject that gets my attention in these matters.
All right. Well, Tim, I thank you so much for coming on with us today. I genuinely appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and being willing to, for 30 years, dive into this hot button topic that it seems that nobody really wants to address, even though that's causing huge ramifications on a large part of our population.
Huge, yeah.
So, and for everybody else, I'm going to remind you, keep looking for that light in the tempest, because God will show you the way.